Housekeeping Items. So like I said, I did just mute everyone to avoid any interferences. Please turn your video off to avoid sharing your video with the group or being captured in the recording. We will be recording today. Also, please close all other applications, especially email, so that your system will run smoothly. And then lastly, just a reminder to please keep all conversations geared towards the benefit of the community and today's topic. So with that out of the way, we will begin today's roundtable with introductions from our panelists. Then each panelist will share their perspectives and insights on the topic of seamlessly onboarding staff virtually. The panelists will also respond to questions from the audience. So to kick us off today, let's go ahead and turn to Daniel first. Daniel, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Daniel Bressler. I'm a junior engineer. I graduated 2 years ago from NYU. I've been onboarded recently, as 3 months ago. I got laid off from COVID, and then thank God, I got hired. So I actually have just been through the onboarding process, and that's kind of my perspective I'm bringing. I'm, just out of school, just in the industry, so I'm kind of on the receiving end on the onboarding.
Awesome, Daniel. Well, thanks so much for joining us. We're excited to hear your perspective. Next, I'll go ahead and turn to Guna. Guna, can you introduce yourself next?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Gunalan. I go by Guna for short. I'm your immediate past president of ASCE. I'm also senior vice president with a company called AECOM, and I come at the other end of the spectrum, technically challenged, but have some feedback on, how do you go about doing this onboarding virtually seamlessly is the catchphrase there, right? So see if I can shed some light and share some views from my colleagues, and including my own son, who just onboarded and started to work about a few months ago.
Awesome, that's great. Thank you so much for joining us, Guna. You have so much knowledge to share with us, so we're excited to have you. Is your son civil, or is he's
biomedical, but he's an MD PhD, but yeah.
Yep, awesome. So I'll go ahead and turn next to Stacy. Stacy, can you go ahead and introduce yourself next?
Sure. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stacy McCavish. I am the Regional Recruiting and HR Director at DeBerry. I cover all of the Southeast region from an HR employee relations perspective, as well as I'm responsible for all of recruiting across the entire company at DeBerry. So we faced quite a bit of challenges during COVID, including recruiting and learning how to virtually onboard folks. So I'm looking forward to today's discussion and learning from one another today. So
I would like to get some dirt on Rob Victor. You just got him on board recently too, right?
We did. Yes, I work with him in Fairfax. So yes, so good man.
Yeah, Rob is a member of ASE. He served on the board with me as well. So
okay.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Stacy, and maybe we can have an offline session to share some dirt too.
Yeah.
Awesome. Nala, I'll go ahead and let you introduce yourself next.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Nala Williams. I'm a civil project designer with Core States Group in Dallas, and I'm currently serving as the Vice Governor for the Young Professionals Council for the Construction Institute with ASCE. And I just graduated in December, and I started my job in January, and we've been virtual since March. So just a lot of input on transitioning and trying to learn a new job virtually. So looking forward to the discussion.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Nala. It's great to have such a wide variety of perspectives today. So hopefully we'll get a great conversation going. I'll go ahead and turn to our first question. And just a reminder, please go ahead and share any questions in the chat box. Like I said, very diverse panel that has some great expertise to share. So if you have any questions, please share them in the chat box and we'll go ahead and prioritize those. As a reminder, if you don't have access to the chat box, you can also email professional@asce.org, and we'll field questions that way too. But I'll turn to our kickoff question first. What is one thing that you are doing differently now to help with new hires get off to a good start in a virtual environment? Or what is one thing that you would like to see companies do differently to help you as a new hire? Like we said, we had different perspectives. So from either slant, you know, what are you doing differently? So Daniel, I'll go ahead and start with you.
Yeah, sure. So my recent experience was interesting. So yeah, so right when I got hired, I did go in person for the interview and all that. So I did get to meet who I was working with and my teammates. But that quickly transitioned to, you know, you're working from home now, and we're going to show you how to do everything from home. So the way it worked was they pretty much like took control of the computer and then like kind of showed me this, you know, this is where we keep this is where we keep that. But pretty much they almost kind of, I would say, threw me into it, which was beneficial. They gave me a project, and then all the questions I had, I kind of had to be like, okay, where's this, where's that? And that's kind of the way I learned. So I would say a way to help maybe is now everything is online. Maybe record one of those sessions and then send it to a new orientee and be like, here is, you know, a typical 80 first questions you're going to ask. And then kind of just have like, here's the resources that you need.
Yeah, that's a great idea, Daniel. Stacy, I'll turn to you next. What are you doing to help new hires succeed in this new environment?
Sure. So we learned very quickly the need to create a virtual onboarding document for our managers, just to kind of like a one-place catch-all, just letting them know like the importance for pre-planning, even more so now that we're all in a virtual environment, because we do not have the luxury anymore to just walk in down the hall or have those drive-by conversations or FaceTime and whatnot. So just kind of breaking it down by sections, creating who to contact list for what, you know, what you can expect, what trainings have to be done in your first week, coming up with a list of like, here's where you go for here. And it needs to be customizable to the individual, kind of what Daniel was saying, but taking it a little bit of a step ahead, managers custom it for that employee just to make it easy. They can't just pop their head around the corner and ask you in an office whenever they're working virtual. So just helping our managers pre-plan the process as much as possible, reaching out to the employee just because the employee has accepted the offer and they're going to join with us. It's so important to keep in touch and keep those connections even to the day leading up to their start date. They don't get to come into the office. They're going to be at home. So like it never hurts to drop them an email, have a teammate drop them an email, let them introduce yourself a little bit. I mean, you can say your name, what your background is. You're looking forward to them joining the team, helping the employee be very comfortable on their start date, even though they're not going to be able to be face-to-face with you in the office. So we created a kind of like a virtual onboarding plan, and we call it virtual onboarding like seamlessly or something to that effect. And so we share that with managers. It's posted on our internal intranet, so anyone can really access it. So that's something that we did this summer and published.
Awesome. That sounds like a great resource for all your managers. Guna, I'll turn to you next. What are some of the things that you all are doing to improve the onboarding experience?
I think, what has happened now is there's a lot of work that needs to be done ahead of time. And I think, simple things that you would expect, right? So everything is done beforehand, including shipping the equipment to the individual's place, because the person needs to have the laptop or the means to be able to log in virtually, which you typically don't think about in a traditional way where they come into the office, you make them sit in a conference room or in a cubicle where there's already a system set up for them and so on. But now you have to plan ahead and do it, and they have to do a lot of things ahead of time. And if they show up on the day of their employment, they cannot sign up as somebody who's just being hired, but it's already an employee who needs to know how to navigate through the system. So there's a lot of upfront work that needs to be done. That's kind of an interesting deal that you have to ship the equipment, make sure it's working, make sure the person is familiar with all of that stuff. And then the other challenge to make it more seamless, depending on the demographic. If you have somebody like Daniel or me, Daniel probably will whiz through this thing probably, and I'm just going to say, okay, where is the key and where is that key? So you have to figure out how do you bring, whether you do it individually or do it collectively. Those are all logistics that I'm sure Stacy and others have to work through ahead of time to make it seamless.
Awesome. Seamless is the key word here, right?
Yep.
Nala, I'll turn to you next. What would you like to see companies do differently to improve the onboarding experience during this time?
I think just one thing would be like maybe having a pre-written sort of guide or like a go-by for some things that that you do, whether it be in CAD design or just processes for just either conversing with clients or sending out this document this way. Something written down to where I don't have to bother the person every minute, every time I have a question, or at least something that'll guide me. So I think that's good, but the biggest thing is just to have open communication, be available to whoever's being hired and let them, if they have a question, make sure that you're there to really answer that for them. So I think that would be helpful.
So Teresa, I added one thing for Stacy maybe is this is one thing that popped into my head is, this is great if, you're talking with somebody like, Nala or, Daniel and Steph, how do you do this seamlessly with somebody who has certain disabilities and stuff? How, what are the things that you need to do? Because that's a whole different ball game, in terms of discussion, making sure that, they are prepared, you're prepared to be able to bring, those types of folks and also make them feel comfortable and make it become seamless. So, this is something else. I'm not sure, Stacy, whether you all have thought through that process and have that as part of your written procedures and product protocols. But, this popped into my head when I was discussing with some of our folks, HR folks and others too. So, I probably, started sending them, in all different directions with that question. So.
And I would still say a lot of this goes back to being able to pre-plan and understand what do we need to do in order to set this up for success. Just like if you were going to have someone who was going to be joining the office and they needed a reasonable accommodation to join the office, and whatever that is, making sure that we understand what accommodations would be needed even from a remote environment. Maybe it's a standing desk. Maybe it's a certain chair. We actually we are also working on a telework policy and agreement post COVID, and it's going to look very different from what it did prior to COVID. And there's a lot more safety checks and balances in there, just making sure we ensure our employees, in the office are safe and all the safety procedures. But now we need to be taking a closer look for that at home. Just simple things that, folks might not be thinking of regularly, having cords everywhere, making sure you're sitting like at a desk properly and you get up and you take breaks. I mean, we get up in the office and we walk to the kitchen or to go get a drink or a coffee or whatever, making sure that you take time to stand up and stretch and give yourself some release just from sitting there all day. But I would say, to answer your question about, folks with certain disabilities, it would be from, the manager and the HR perspective, both understanding, what accommodations would we need to make in terms for this to be, a successful operation. Maybe it's a certain stand for the, laptop or the desktop to, sit on. Maybe it's a certain headset. Maybe it's a certain keyboard or whatever that is. But asking those questions up front and again, pre-planning to make sure the individual feels comfortable on their first day and that we were well prepared for them. Whether you're virtual or in person, the last thing any employer would ever want to do is have an employee feel like we weren't prepared for them and that we weren't excited for them to join our team.
Just to piggyback off that, yeah, I definitely agree with that. Like through internships, like my experience, like when we were in person way back when I used to go into the office and like you come and you have like your desk prepared, even if it was just like a pad of paper and like a little note saying like, Daniel, welcome to the team, and just like a little hard hat. Even though that wasn't mine to keep, it just still felt like welcoming. So the fact that companies are like moving with times and kind of like sending everything out and making sure that everyone is prepared and everything's well planned, it definitely is like a sense of, oh, welcome, we're happy that you're working here. So that definitely is something that does not go unnoticed.
Yeah.
It's the little things, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Definitely.
Awesome. Well, those are great things to think through. I'll go ahead and move on to the next question. Again, just a reminder, please, if you have any questions, please feel free to share them in the chat box. What is your biggest concern about onboarding staff virtually or being onboarded virtually? What are you doing to mitigate this concern? Nala, I'll turn to you next. What are some of the concerns you've faced so far?
Probably just number one is the internet. With everyone being at home, the children are on school for the internet all day, or, even some other family members working from home. Our little house internet is struggling, to keep up. So that's always a concern, especially if you're heavy in CAD work. I mean, that's bogging down so much of your computer. So I've had to kind of finagle, get some extenders here and there and everything to make that work. But then the other thing is, just making sure that you're still learning while we're in this virtual environment. Like you might know how to do something, and so, it's easiest to kind of get stuck in that pattern. So you want to make sure that you're still trying to learn, even though, it may not seem like the easiest thing to do right now, but try and set aside that time with your manager, or like I've spoken with my manager about some next steps I want to do. So he's, lighting that path for me and setting me up to do that. So making sure that I'm still learning about everything, and, finding new opportunities even within the company. So just don't get stagnant just because we're at home. I think that's probably a big concern.
Awesome. Stacy, did you have something to add?
Sure, I always have something to
You
add.
came off mute, so I assumed it was something good.
Okay. So, sure, I guess one of our greatest concerns, and maybe this is because I work in HR, so we deal with the human aspect and perspective, is just the concern of employees, both current and new employees, not feeling connected to the organization because you're not having the day-to-day face interaction and the drive-by conversations that you get to have with teammates and that help build chemistry, collaboration, and all of those things that we get to experience when we're in person. And so we are encouraging, again, and this is in our virtual onboarding best practice document, just to encourage managers, like, be intentional with your employees, both new and current, about scheduling these one-on-one tag ups with them. I mean, very often you could get to like Thursday in the week and it's like, oh my gosh, I have not talked to so-and-so on the team because I'm stuck in my day-to-day, or I'm, doing meetings, and we don't have the luxury anymore of running into one another in the hallway. So it's intentional scheduling. One-on-one clients in HR have a bi-weekly one-on-one touch base with our managers, and it's our time to have a list, and if there's things that we want to talk about, things that they want to talk about, it's a scheduled, dedicated time between the employee and the manager to making sure that those conversations are happening. But also helping the employee, showing them ways to be engaged, encouraging them to comment on our internal intranet communication, be curious, go and try to learn things about the organization as much as you can, even though we're in a remote environment. So.
Yeah, those are all great things. I mean, connection is really something I think everyone's struggling with at this point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. I'll go ahead and turn to our next question. How do you help new hires build relationships in a remote environment? So you kind of talked about that, Stacy, a little bit, as far as, being intentional and making sure that you schedule those one-on-ones. But, are there other things that you're helping your managers do in building relationships?
Mm-hmm. So we would also say to, schedule a monthly Teams call with everyone on that team. Schedule a monthly, and it doesn't have to be about work. It can be over lunch. You could do a coffee chat. You could do a happy hour after, work hours, or you could do like a lunch. Our HR team, throughout the pandemic, usually once a month, we will have a dedicated time, 1 hour. And sometimes it was the theme, like, where do you want to go on vacation when the pandemic's, when this is all behind us? Or we all had to send in pictures of ourselves when we were under the age of 5, and we all had to guess who it was. And just ways to connect that way in a fun way to just lighten the mood, and talk about stuff that's not work related. But we also, so just connecting that way. I also mentioned our company does DISC. I don't know if anyone else is familiar with DISC. It's a little bit similar to Myers-Briggs, and it's a team bonding. It creates self-awareness. It creates awareness around learning how to work better with others, how to learn each other's preferences, what their natural tendencies are. And so that has been a big request in this virtual environment. It's challenging facilitating DISC virtual, but we have found ways to do that, and it gets the team together. You get to learn about one another. You get to learn about yourself, and the whole point of it is to help build better and more effective relationships. So that's another avenue that we try to promote as well.
So there's a couple of things I wanted to at least share is, it comes down to communication, right? It's all about communication, especially in a virtual environment. And one of the things that, I remind myself, I'm not very familiar is, we had some kind of a software that was set up within AECOM where once a week, you have this questionnaire that comes up, has your manager been in touch with you? What's your plan for the next week? Do you need help from your manager and so on? And that feeds back to your manager so that he knows what you're working on and what is coming up and where you might need help and so on. So there's a lot of tools out there. And most importantly, at least from talking to my son and stuff, is when you have questions, you need to keep watching your screen, whether it's Chatter, Yammer, Slack, you can't, it's hard to teach this old dog new tricks, but in trying to keep up with all this changing software and trying to keep your eyes on multiple things, when somebody asks a question, make sure you pay attention to it and respond back, because otherwise the person is going to be waiting for, to hear back from you, and it's not a productive time and so on. So it's a lot of, we, as much as we talk about not to multitask, but I think we are in a virtual world where you have to figure out how to multitask and prioritize and communicate, stay on top of things. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on within this 13-inch screen that you need to be aware of and be able to respond back in a timely manner. And the other thing that I tell our managers is we need to be very careful in terms of communication. We talk about unconscious biases, especially in a remote stuff. When you're not there in front of a person, it becomes even more reason to be careful in terms of what you say, how you say it, because it comes across the screen very differently, and it's a HR nightmare. Need to make sure that people are extra cautious and very deliberate in terms of what they communicate and how they communicate and stuff. So that's something else too in a virtual world that managers and everybody needs to be conscious about.
So, yeah, I mean, I work in a smaller company, so for me, we don't really text. We'll just call, and it's not even a pickup hi, how are you? It's more of just you pick up and it's just straight to the chase, because calling is more of just walking into the other person's cubicle in our eyes. But I'd assume in that it works because we're such a small team. Another thing that my manager does, and I appreciate this if he's watching, is that he'll always ask, start the day. We'll generally have a day, the beginning of the day, a phone call, and he'll start off by just saying, oh, how are you? And then mention something I mentioned, how's classes going? Or how's your kid? Or just things that he just picked up that I've said before. And then we'll just have a 5-minute chat at the beginning of the day just about me as a person and not work at all. And then we'll be okay, so here's the projects we have today. So that kind of just, and then I'll learn about him and he'll learn about me. And it kind of helps a lot with that communication and that, relationship, so that when I do eventually, we go into the office, I actually know who he is as a person, not just a name on the screen.
Yeah, that's so important, Daniel. Everyone has, families, life, work, you are a person, right? It's so important. So to follow up with that, that's kind of talking about the relationship from the manager to the employee, but this is kind of an interesting question in the chat box. You spoke about being intentional about scheduling one-on-ones between managers and newer employees and team bonding. How about what can the newer employees do to get to know other team members? So almost that lateral communication. Nala, do you have some thoughts on that? You're shaking your head, so.
Yeah, I do. I think I know one thing that my company did. I'm not sure if they necessarily meant for it to be this way on purpose, but they started doing like these lesson learned calls every month. So everyone in civil across the whole company gets together and we discuss, one person's project, maybe some problems they've, had go bad or some solutions that they did. And so just doing that, if people cut their camera on, I can see who they are now, because I've never met them. They're in different states, so I can see who they are, put a face to their name, and then they see me as well. So that really helps. And then also, if an accomplishment happens or something, let the whole company know, and then they reach out and talk to you and you get to know them. And then, I think also just connecting on LinkedIn is a big deal too. If you do that, that's one way to just at least know who they are and they can know you. And they will reach out when they have something in your area. They will call you because they saw you on LinkedIn or on one of those calls. So just connecting with them any way you can.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. And Stacy, you have a great comment in the chat. I'll let you go ahead and expand on that.
Sure. So I, even pre-COVID, managing a remote workforce is not new to me because I actually have several recruiters that are 100% remote, even pre-COVID. So anytime that we would have, someone new joining the team, I have recruiters that sit in Denver. I have one that sits in Kansas City. I have another one that sits in Raleigh. And so whenever we would have someone new, they obviously knew that we were going to have a new team member, and I would let the current employees know, so-and-so is going to be starting this week. I'm mapping out their onboarding plan and their schedule for what they're going to be doing this week. And so I wanted each of you to take, about 30 minutes for you to sit down with the individual. Now that we have Teams, I would say, make it a Teams call. Please have your camera on. I will tell the new employee to put their camera on so they can get to, put a face to the name and make a better connection that way versus just voice. And in the call, I would just say, all I'm asking you to do is to, introduce yourself, introduce your role, what you, do for the company, how long you've been here, why do you enjoy working here, what you could be a resource for the individual going forward. Make them feel comfortable coming to you, in the future. And just, share your contact information, let them know that, you'll check back with them to see if they have any questions. Again, it's being intentional about making sure we're making the connection because we're not in person. So it almost needs to be, you have to be intentional. You need to schedule it and you need to force yourself, bring yourself to do it because it's not going to happen naturally anymore because you're not in the office. So that's something we've done on the team. And I feel like that has been, very successful. They each kind of have their own little roles and their roles within the team in their own way that they do things. So I just ask that they introduce that and talk to the new hire. And of course, we'll have a monthly recruiting team. And so that's not the first time that I would be introducing the new employee to the rest of the recruiters. They've all kind of met one another. So that's what I would suggest there.
Yeah, that's some great feedback. I know Daniel just put something in the chat box about breaking the ice. Do you have recommended icebreaker type questions that you share with your team, Stacy?
I can't say, and I actually started thinking of something as soon as I started finishing my sentence. We also have several employee resource groups within Dewberry, and I would also encourage folks to connect that way. So for example, we have some of the recruiters who are part of, the emerging professionals group, and it's not, there isn't a definition for who can and cannot join, but I would encourage your current employees to be take them with you to that, next meeting. Say you want to introduce that employee to the group. It's pretty intimidating for someone new to just show up and be hi, I'm the new person here. So ask them to come along with you. Or if you're aware of a lunch and learn session that's going to happen, or, you're part of, for folks that use Microsoft Teams, I'm part of 30 teams. invite them to those teams and tell them, like, I'm going to include you on this. I think it would be great for you to, start to learn what we do here. You kind of have to be in front of it and think ahead, even more so than what we all did whenever we were in the office, because it would be very easy just to kind of like forget these things, and then the new hire unfortunately would feel like they're kind of left in the dark. So
yeah, I definitely think that's a great point that you mentioned, that just because like your manager, he may not realize it, but as a new hire, you're kind of like looking out for signals like that you're doing a good job or where you can improve. And like if your manager happens to be busy that day and doesn't reach out to you, then like you might take that as, oh no, I did something wrong, especially as a new hire where you're always still super like worried about your position in that. So I think it's a great that you keep bringing up that your actions have to be very intentional now more than ever, because you don't really, it's over the screen, it's really hard to judge how everyone takes everything. So I think that's a great point that you're bringing up.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I know, Nala, you just put something in the chat about spotlights. Did you want to talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. It's really just like they pick about 3 employees every week, and they ask them kind of the same questions, what's your background, some hobbies that you do, and, how did you come to this company? And then they share pictures of, the things they're doing with their family or just individually. So they email that out. My company emails that out to everyone every week. So every Friday, you're meeting 3 new people that you probably didn't know before. So just something like that, the company wants to take that time to do that. And I mean, the person interviewing you gets to know you, and then now the whole company has a face to the name. So I think that's really helpful too.
Yeah, we do that at AECOM too, for all new employees, an introductory deal about who they are, which group they're going to belong to, some of the favorite hobbies and stuff that they do, some family details. So that goes out for every new employee that comes in within the office, so that you get to informally meet folks that way first, and then of course they find a reason to get together with the new employees and introduce them to the rest of the group as well.
That's great. You can go ahead, Guna.
No, I said that was done, when we used to do it in person, but now virtually, right? So it's still that virtual introduction happens, but.
Yeah, no, that's great. You can even, I'm just thinking like, Nala, if I watch somebody's spotlight, I can send them like a LinkedIn message and connect with them and say, hey, I saw your spotlight and I have this in common with you. So that's just a great like door opener, right?
Absolutely.
So the one question I would have for, Daniel or Nala is, this all happens, as I said, communication. If, we had similar experiences with people, it's a personality stuff too, right? If you're outgoing and gregarious and all that stuff, you don't have to worry about any of these things. So what about with a person who's a little bit reserved and is not gregarious and stuff? It becomes a little harder to do this virtually. You need to go the extra mile to make them feel welcome and comfortable and stuff. So that's an interesting dynamics there, that the supervisors or others need to go the extra mile to reach out to the individual, and the individual needs to know that in this virtual environment you can't afford to be a little quiet. You need to be a little bit more vocal.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm a very vocal person, so I'm that outgoing personality type. So I have no problem, reaching out. But if I were shy, I'd probably say that it's really, it's kind of on my manager, my supervisor to reach out to me. I'd probably be very reserved. I'd probably not want to really talk to him if I had a question. I'd probably want to try and figure it out. So it's kind of up to him to at least make it inviting to me. And then also, like, if you don't hear from me, just definitely check in or try and like Stacy was saying, invite me to something to kind of force me to get into that space, get involved, and get to know people and talk it out. So I think just an invitation, really, or at least being open to them.
Mm-hmm. If there's just one thing I could add there, you made me think of it, Nala. So I mentioned that our company does DISC, and that is like, you're learning about like your natural tendencies, right? Like what yours are, what your coworkers are, what your manager's tendencies is. So as a matter of fact, my manager at Dewberry, him and I, we are very different personalities. He's very He's very open. He's very like, he needs FaceTime. He's very, he'll be sarcastic in some way, but he wants to make sure everything's good. He wants to like make sure how your weekend is, checking in on you. And like, that's so important to him. That's where he gets his energy from. And that's his way of connecting with other folks. I probably tend to go to the other way where I'm like, I have work to do. I'm like head down. I'm like, don't bother me. I got to get this done, and it's stressing me out every second that this isn't done. That's how I operate. Neither way is is right or wrong, but it's understanding and respecting the differences. So I know if I got to Tuesday afternoon and I have not yet spoke to my manager, I'm like, he's probably feeling a lack of connection. I better reach out. And so it's like taking a moment and realizing like maybe what the other person's needs are, especially, and I think that's, and you've said that, Nala, it's the manager that needs to understand. It is a two-way street, but the manager needs to understand and how the employees like operate, what motivates them. That's my responsibility for the recruiters on the team. Each of them are different. Each of them connect in a different way. And so I have a couple that are very reserved, and I know like I just need to check in like once a week and make sure we're good because I don't want to overwhelm them. But I have other ones that like they want to talk every day. They want to talk multiple times a day. And that's just like a difference in styles, but I think it's recognizing them and figuring out the most effective way to work with each other's differences.
So. I definitely think that, yeah, it's both great points. I also think, I mean, I'm also more of an outgoing person, so I'm the one who makes a phone call. I generally don't have a problem starting a new conversation with someone. But yeah, so what I'd say is that I think for introverts or people who, don't, maybe for the managers, if they can set goals, or maybe the person set like a milestone, like when I hit this task, I'm going to contact you. Even if it's not like a big task, it's just like when I'm done doing something, I'm going to contact you. So at least you have, and then you set the next like little baby step. So it could just be even like a text or a phone call, like, hey, yeah, I'm done. And that's it. And then, like, okay, they still exist and they're still around. So that might be a way to overcome that fear slowly by taking like little baby steps of just small little, incremental tasks, I would say.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Stacy, you just came off mute. Did you have something to add?
Oh no, I'm good. I'm good, but thank you.
I try to pay attention to who's on mute and who's coming off. So, but yeah, no, communication styles is really great to think about, is how different people want to be communicated with, and thinking about other people's needs during this difficult time. I know, like Daniel, you have a little one, so I'm sure there's certain hours that are off limits, if you will, right?
Yeah, between like 2 and 3, like I have to whisper when I'm on the phone.
Oh yes, so fun though.
There
awesome.
there was a question on the chat, Teresa.
Yep. So we've got a question. A lot of this conversation has been centered around being intentional during remote work. What is one lesson learned about being intentional that you will be taking forward to the hybrid / in-person setting in the future? So this is such a great question. Thinking about 2021 and how it progresses, as things become more hybrid, possibly going back to in-person, how do we take being intentional in that setting? Guna, I know you must be thinking about this pretty regularly, right?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I typically do, as a manager, even when I'm in the office, is I do my walkabouts. I walk around the office quite a bit, just to go say hello to people, see how things are going on, so on, and not do it. I know we're being intentional here, but at the same token, you just need to make sure that you're not being a nuisance either. So managers need to do the walkabouts, still, be in touch with the people, but at the same token, make sure that you're not just getting into their way, but make sure that you don't lose that touch, and then shut your door. My office door is always open, and I do my walkabout. So that's how I have done it in the past, and I think I'll do it the same way going forward, assuming that people are going to be in the office. And the hybrid situation will be, there'll be a mix of people who are there, there are mixed people who may not be there. So you just need to keep track of that stuff and make sure you're reaching out to the folks that are not there, a little bit more intentionally than with the people who might be there. So it's a tricky deal trying to keep up with who's in and who's not in the office. So.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. So Stacy, I know you had mentioned before we started this call that you are managing some offices where people are going into the office. How have you handled that so far?
So it's a bit of a mixed bag approach. Do you mean the people who are going in and what is going on in those offices?
Yeah, so that hybrid situation, like in some parts of the country, you know, how's intentionality handled there?
I would say very carefully, considering the folks that are in the office. I would say it is mainly a lot of our MEP folks. We have about, I believe, 5 design centers throughout Dewberry, and a lot of those engineers are expected to be doing their engineering work in the office. And so it has to be very calculated right now, I would say, with the virus, in that all of the CDC, whatever state you're in, whatever local, jurisdiction, that all of those guidelines are being followed. I would say everyone kind of like stays at their own. You kind of don't have the in-person interaction, although you would think that you would whenever you're in person. But if they're in there, they have to wear a mask likely the whole day. I know that that's what's going on in North Carolina. So we have managers in offices. We have folks working in cubicles. They're not joining in a conference room for a meeting, because you're not supposed to have over a certain amount of people in a room for a duration of time. So I would say the majority of their communication is still taking place via Teams. I know that's what we do whenever I go into Fairfax. Even if we have a meeting within HR, we're all like in our office, but then we're all on Teams like for the meeting. So I think there's good takeaways that we'll be able to take away from this pandemic. I'm glad that Teams has become a thing, and that we can video chat with people. Like I said, some of the recruiters that I have in some of the other states, I only got to see them a couple of times per year, and now I get to see them every day. So there is some silver lining that we're seeing through this pandemic, and I think it's balancing, like Guna had said, the folks that are in the office and who are not. It's going to be that way. We have a communication tool that kind of says, like, so-and-so's in the office in Fairfax on Mondays. So-and-so is there on Wednesdays. So people aren't like emailing, being a nuisance, like, are you here or aren't you? Just go to the one-stop shop calendar, and you can see who's in the office, who, is going to be out for the afternoon. It's a communication tool where we all can go and see, and we're not like worrying about one another, where the other person is. So that has been very helpful too. And I think that will continue. So.
Yeah, no, that's great. So how are you managing that document? Is that just like a Google Doc or something?
It's within Microsoft Office. It's a calendar. We have a shared calendar within HR, and you're expected to put on there the days that you're going to be in Fairfax or the days that you're going to be in the office. And that's also a way that we manage how many people will be in a department, like at one time. And so, or if somebody's going to be on vacation, or if someone, we got people in different time zones. We have people in, all over the place, whatever. So instead of, worrying that something's wrong with someone, or, like, oh, where's so-and-so, like, just put it on the calendar. Then we can all just check and manage it. But it is expected to be updated. So right now, during the holiday season next week, it's like almost everyone's off. So, but with that has been a good check and balance, because my manager, Dave, he's like, I need 2 people in Fairfax, so you can quickly see who's off and who's on deck to be in Fairfax to make sure we have appropriate coverage. So that's been very helpful for us too, and I can see that staying that way.
Yeah, no, that's great. That sounds fantastic. So we got another question in the chat. How can the organization assure that mental health and welfare of those not in the office? It seems to be easy to mask, no pun intended, how you are really feeling / doing during limited phone calls / Teams meetings. Nala, I know you're nodding your head. What are your thoughts here?
I think it's just a matter of paying attention Usually you'll probably see maybe lower productivity, or like maybe they seem like they're taking a little bit longer to do something. I know I've had my moments where I'm like, okay, I'm totally burnt out. I don't really want to do this. You just kind of need a break. So then, if you're paying attention and then like truly ask them and try and get them to talk to you about it, or maybe don't make it so informal, or don't make it so formal. Rather, you want it to be, informal, personal to that person. And then, when they get to that point where they're burnt out, don't, make it a big deal when they ask for that time off. They need that mental health day. They need that, welfare check day, just to kind of like recenter and get back to it. Because, I mean, if you're managing, or if this is your company, you want them to be at their best level. So if they're, if they're getting down, you want them to take that break to revitalize and come back. So you really just have to pay attention, and then, be open with them, let them know that, hey, if you need some time, you can take some time. It's not going to be the end of the world. We'll figure it out. I know there's stuff to do, but like, if you need that break, you need to take that break. So just.
Mhm.
That's so important. Go ahead, Guna.
So that's one of the things I do, even before the COVID stuff. When I come home and I put my telephone on the island in the kitchen at 7 o'clock, and I won't touch it, till maybe after, just to check on a few things. Same thing, don't send emails and things to employees at odd hours and all hours. You need to have the same discipline as you would if you were coming into the office, and same things on the weekends. With the stuff that we have now, I feel like a dog on a leash. Doesn't matter where I go, and somebody's always going to get hold of me. So we have to be disciplined in how we and what we demand of our fellow employees, and when we demand this stuff. And they need some downtime, get away from all of the Zoom. I mean, I love seeing all of you on Zoom and everything else, but I deliberately on the weekends, I don't get on my computer. I don't do this. So there are certain things that you need to do to maintain your sanity. You need to switch off the TV, you need to switch off the laptops, the phones, and everything else. So, you need to set an example, and you need to make sure that you don't make undue asks of your employees, because just because you think that they are going to be at the other end of the spectrum. So that's one of the things I practice, and I do the same thing for those who work with me.
Mhm.
No, that's great. I mean, I think boundaries are really important in this new environment, right? Setting those boundaries. Daniel, what would you like to add?
Yeah, I think that just both those points, like to just validate both of them, like Guna said, like that's very true. That once like it hits, like I mean, I make it my responsibility to be at my desk at like 8:30. So therefore, at like 5:30 or 6, like when I log off, it should be expected that like then I'm done for the day. Even though yes, I have my computer open because let's say I'm in school or something, I shouldn't feel the obligation because I see like an email come in. Oh, quickly, let me check this email. So as a manager, if the manager does realize that, mine do, thank God. But like, it's good to hear that managers are thinking of that end. Because if I do get an email as a new employee, you're never sure. Like, is this expected of me? Am I supposed to? And then kind of tying into what Nala said, like those 5 minute phone calls by the beginning of the day, those actually like really picked up. Like when I would told my manager, I was like, yeah. So he was kind of we were talking about how school was, and then kind of finals was this week, and he said, oh, if you want to take off to study for finals, you could take off a day. It's okay. And like just the fact that he picked up on that, because I actually was planning on asking him that day, like, oh, can I take off like the next week? So the fact that he picked up on that just shows that he's doing good at what he does. So I would say those informal conversations, 5 minutes at the beginning of the day. Hey, how are you? And you could kind of tell if the person needs a day, and just let them know, hey, we're in this together. If you need a half a day, you need a full day, it's okay. We're all people.
Yeah, that's so important. Stacy, you're nodding as well. Did you have anything to add?
Oh yeah, I mean, I completely relate to so much of what just got said. I mean, I can't say it enough how much managers need to check in with your employees. Yes, about work, but during those one-on times, you got to make time to make a personal connection with them outside of, their tasks and deliverables. That's how you build chemistry. That's how you build a rapport with them. I mean, I've been working with Dave I'll be here 9 years, and even during this our one-on-one, like he would take time, whenever it was, and he would just be like, how's Stacy doing? How are you doing? And I'm like, I'm good. And he's like, no, how are you doing? Like he would like dig in. I have 3 kids. We're virtual. My husband and I are both home. I mean, it's a little bit chaotic from like how things have been in the past, but really trying to like make time and make sure you're understanding how your employees are doing. I mean, I've had employees just this week where I could pick up, they're overwhelmed. They're about to, lose their mind over, workload. And it's okay to just say, like, we're in this, we're going to work through this together. If you need to take a minute, take a minute. Honestly, we're not saving lives here. We're recruiting for positions. And if you can't do this, we will get help. We will get someone to, offset your workload and just make them feel at ease. That means the world to them whenever a manager is reaching out, like on a personal level, that they personally care. And that's part of retention too. And managers need to understand that people need to feel valued. They feel fed. They need to feel a sense of purpose. And so I can't say enough. And, just, I would say, remain flexible. Yes, results need to happen and they're very important, but also know that this is not normal, that time that we're in right now. And if you can be flexible and find other, workarounds or ways to work through your employees, it will go miles with the employees, and they, it will end up paying off very well for you in the end. So I just agreed with much of what got said previously. So
yeah, absolutely. So I think we probably have time for one more question, and this kind of gets to that issue of company culture, if you will, right, as far as how you handle mental health. So I'll just end, before we do our wrap-ups, one of the questions that we did have was, how do you introduce your new hires to company culture? Guna, I'll let you answer that one.
One of the things, this is, pre-pandemic and stuff, with some of the things you get to sit with some of the senior managers, and then they talk to you about culture. They share some experiences and, give you some examples and reassure you, and, all of those kinds of things that happens maybe at the headquarters or wherever the case may be. And I think, it is, even as we were remotely large corporations, when you're connected with different offices where your manager is not in the same office, but you probably may not even get to see him once a year because you're in a different line of business, and the head of the business line is sitting somewhere else. It becomes very important for people to understand what it cannot be written policies, but things that you would go and things that you would need, especially when you're facing outward with your clients. What is it that you can do, and what is it that the company will do to stand behind you? You need to know whether the company's got your back on certain issues when you're pushing back or when you're even making an offer, right? So that's what the company culture is about. And I think if you sit with some of the long-standing leaders of the organization, sit down with them and have a fireside chat type of deal, when they share some stories with you, share some stories of the boardroom discussions, some of the decisions that they make, why they made those decisions. If you had that kind of a thing, I've had the privilege of working with some of these big leaders in these organizations on a one-on-one basis, and then that's how you pass on the culture, not by saying, go to the ecosystem, pull up this particular page and read through it, and then you'll find out from there. That's not where you learn it, but that's the virtual world we are in. So I think the manager, others need to find the time to spend a little bit of time with the new employees as they come on board, to tell them about the company culture, things that you would absolutely will not accept, the things that you would, always stand behind them. I think it's a question of making time. All the senior executives, I mean, I've had some stories, one of the companies, the senior partner used to stand at the elevator shaft every evening at 5 o'clock. When the people are leaving to go home, he said, that's the only asset that the company has, and they're leaving at 5 o'clock, I want to make sure that they come back tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, right? Because you need to ask them how they're doing, how did the day go, what did they work on, what are the challenges, what the plans for the weekend, and so on. So I think it's even more responsible for us to make the time, for managers to make the time to reach out to employees, have those types of conversations, honest conversations, and make them feel part of a family. I mean, otherwise it's a job, right? It's not just a job. You need to feel like that you belong to a group, and it's a professional family, just like we say this is an ASE family. So that's kind of how I would approach it, and I would encourage all the senior managers, because employees are the assets that we have, at least from our perspective. We don't own buildings, but or any other assets. So
Mhm.
it's important that we take the time to build relationship. It's like building personal relationship with your spouses. You need to spend the time,
Mhm.
to hold the thing together, even with your children and the rest of the family. So this is an extended family. So that's how you part the culture. And so it's even more important on a virtual deal to find some ways that you can still connect. And if
That's
you can
great.
still and if you can still sneak up and go get a cup of coffee and maintain social distance, do it.
I love that. That's great. That was a fantastic story. So we've got 3 minutes left. I'll go ahead and ask each of our panelists to wrap up, kind of a summary or their closing thoughts. Maybe if you take about 30 seconds or so, and hopefully that'll get us right at 4 o'clock. So, Daniel, do you want to go ahead and start off?
Sure, yeah. I would say my closing thoughts are just from this conversation, but also just from my experience, is that managers are not only managing projects, but now it's more obvious that they're managing people as well. And that's kind of you have to build up that skill as well. So just kind of check in on your employees, and as in on the my end, I definitely should take initiative if I see my manager isn't calling me. Make it a point to call him and just say, hey, I'm just update this and that. So communication is key for sure now more than ever. And my one thing I would bring when we go back to in person would be this communication. So maybe go out for lunch, coffee, whatever it is, non-work related, just to get to know people on a individual basis. Yeah, that's it.
That's fantastic. Stacy, what about you? What are your closing thoughts?
If I could say anything, I would just say for managers and really everyone, take time to connect with one another. Things are very odd right now in that we don't get to see one another. So we're losing the personal connection, which humans actually at some level, we all need it. And so take time to make those connections. Make sure you're listening to your employees, not only about work and deliverables, but listening how they're doing with life. I mean, there was so much that Gunlin just said prior to this. I couldn't agree more. We are a family-based firm, and it feels that way. People actually care about one another, and that's what builds like a sense of belonging for individuals. It creates, a sense of loyalty. And that's like icing on the cake whenever you're working for a firm. I mean, otherwise, exactly what he just said, it becomes a job, and you could do that anywhere. So just make sure you take time for your employees, connect, be flexible right now. This isn't forever, but there are some good takeaways that we will learn from the pandemic and this virtual environment, I'm sure. So.
Absolutely. Gunal, I'll let you share next.
No, go ahead with Nala, because I think I've spoken enough. All I'm going to say, when, when this pandemic is over, we're all going to go nuts and give each other a big hug. So.
Absolutely. No, and thank you, Guna, for sharing your thoughts. That was great. Nala, I'll let you close us out then.
All right. Just be open, communicate with everybody, be intentional, like we said, and just make it clear what you want to get out of it. And I think it'll work out. We have to remember we're people. We're not just sitting behind the desk. So we are still people. So just get to know everybody.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you for our team of panelists. This has been a really, really great conversation. I've greatly enjoyed it. I do want to remind everyone that ASC members can continue the conversation on ASC Collaborate if you want to discuss this topic more. And then if you're not an ASC member, please feel free to reach out to me. Love to talk about ASCE and all the benefits and the family that you can connect with there. So thanks again to all of our panelists. Really enjoyed picking your brain on this.
So Daniel, are you related to Dean Bressler by any chance?
I'm not, but you're not. Don't worry, that's a common question.
Okay, because a good friend of mine from a long time ago. So, okay. Happy holidays, everybody. Stay safe.
Happy
Stay
holidays.
healthy.
Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Nice
Thanks so
guys.
much.